Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski here in Galveston, Texas at the University of Texas Medical Branch, looking at a new friend who interestingly spent some time right here in the beautiful island of Galveston, Dr. Patrick Louchouarn. Patrick is the leadership and performance coach, the senior vice provost for faculty in the Office of Academic Affairs. He's a professor in the School of Earth Sciences and an affiliated faculty member at the Sustainability Institute at The Ohio State University. Patrick, welcome to the Faculty Factory podcast.
Good morning, Kim. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much. You are amazing. I loved already chatting with you as we were preparing for this podcast. You and I have a mutual friend here at UTMB, Dr. Brian Downer, and you responded to his podcast and saying, I know him, and you really enjoyed his episode, and that's how you're here. And then little did I know, here I was describing the island to Patrick, and he's like, yeah, I lived on 12th and Post Office. But anyway, Patrick is going to share his journey 2 years ago because he was at Texas A&M. That's why you are here at Galveston. So take us back, if you wouldn't mind, to you're here on an island, you're thinking, this is a great life. I'm good here. I'm kind of winding down a career. And then boom, the opportunity opens up at OSU and you're building anew. You're starting. So can you tell us a little bit of your story and take us back to that time, Patrick?
Sure. Thank you for mentioning that. I was also an Aggie working for Texas A&M and loving it. And as I mentioned to you, really thinking that was the place I was going to retire. There was not going to be any choice for me. It was, getting into the last phase of my career. I had been hired. I was actually coming from Columbia University and hired, 20 some years ago to join Texas A&M on the island as a faculty. Then I became a department chair for 3 years. And then I was asked to step into the position of Chief Academic Officer of the Galveston campus of Texas A&M, which is an internal campus. It's almost like now it's actually been transformed into college very recently. And at the same time, I was also appointed as an associate provost and working directly under the provost. So close to 14 years ago or so, I started working in an office of the provost, reporting directly to this person, but also spending half of my time on the island of Galveston. I lived there, but I would travel every week up to College Station. So living a, land life and island life at the same time. 5 years ago, I was recruited to become vice provost on Texas A&M main campus. So I moved permanently to College Station. And this was it. I knew this was the final piece. And, I was really going to be serving a number of years in that capacity, already planning to return to the faculty afterwards and really, kind of finish my career as an Aggie. And I got this one email that, sometimes you go, what? That one email from the Ohio State University, an incredible recruiter who's now a colleague of mine, who basically reached out and say, we're looking for, a person to lead a new initiative. We want to create a new office of faculty affairs at OSU, and would you be interested? And the interesting thing to understand from the Ohio State is that in spite of its very long history, 1870, being a very large land-grant university, just like Texas A&M, serving the state, flagship of the state, it never had an organized and structured Office of Faculty Affairs, which is a very common type of office in a major university. So that really piqued my interest. And the vision of the leadership, what this university wanted to do. And also the fact that it's a land-grant university, which really, really appeals to me and my sense of service and my sense of understanding the role of higher education in serving in terms of access, in serving in terms of creating scholarship that is useful for society, really interested me. So I said, sure, I'd love a conversation. And 3 years later, that conversation has led for me, I'm here. We've incorporated the Office of Faculty Affairs, and from an unknown to most of the faculty here, it has become now a very central space for faculty to understand that, or that serve faculty. And the other thing that I want to say is that I learned that afterwards. OSU is not the largest university with respect to the number of students. I think it's third largest, at least in person, but it is the largest university in terms of faculty. Because we have a very large medical school, in addition to the very large land grants, so we have more than 8,600 faculty. So this is an office that serves a really large group of individuals across all the functions of higher education, including health sciences.
Mm. So now you sit here, you're at OSU, you're at a new place. Can you tell us what's going through your mind? You've obviously built and created before in other institutions. What's on your list of immediate to-dos?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, which also speaks to one of the strengths of OSU, which now I want to accelerate. Actually, not just me. With my colleagues, I want to accelerate what OSU does really well, but in one area. So OSU is one of those really, and there are probably others that I don't know of, but does incredibly well in the transition of its executive leaders, particularly academic executive leaders. Every dean gets a coach. Every dean gets a transition team. Part of it is supported by our office as well. Every vice provost, senior vice provost gets a coach, gets, a structure around which with accountability measures to actually transition. The coach I work with helped me around this really great book, The First 90 Days, that is very specific in how to recognize the structure in which you're stepping in and the steps that you need to take to actually develop that and accelerate the success of that unit. Well, for me, it was startup, right? The structure didn't exist. Now, it's not to say that functions didn't exist. There were a number of functions. There were a few individuals responsible for those functions. One of those is the person I worked really close with, Dr. Helen Malone, who is really, we are co-leading this now. We're really as equals leading this structure, and a few others. But we incorporated, and then as a startup, we had to define what does that look like. And in the first 90 days, actually, I had to start designing a vision, a mission, the functions that would actually be developed in the first year, in the second year, in the third year, which we're completing now, and some of the metrics, and particularly KPIs that we need to meet along the way, which because of that transition support, by the first 90 days, I had met all of the outcomes that needed to be met, including the vision of what that structure would look like. By the second 90 days, we had our first website. And then by the end of the first year, we had actually started to complete some of the programming we were thinking around. And now we're at the time where we're completing some things we had projected way in the future, 3 years, forward. And we're still working on that plan that we designed in the very first 90 days. So coming here was not only an incredible opportunity for me to design something from scratch. This is the beauty of designing something, is that if they tell you, well, if you get to do it, but from scratch, how would it look like? I had the opportunity to do that. But at the same time, I had the opportunity to add to my own experience in leadership, an experience in leadership transition I had never experienced before, because I was always in the same movement, the same university. I was moving from one step to another. So I knew the institution. I didn't really have to think too much about a transition. Whereas here, everything was new. And because I had this personal coach and I was in an environment that was supporting transition, it taught me what leadership transition means and how to support it. So
Mm.
this was a great learning opportunity. In addition to be able to do things, I was actually in a learning. I'm still in a learning environment as we speak today.
Leadership transition. So you've said this at least three times, transitions, and I really I'm getting this a lot, and I think this is so important. So I'd love to dig a little deeper into how you now think of transition and then helping faculty members to transition or succession planning, if you will. And I really just kind of want to amplify what you said. When we are, learning, we're getting our PhDs, our MDs, our MBAs, all the letters, there's a prescribed curriculum. We're checking boxes that one must accomplish this competency, learn this, take this, do this, and we check boxes. And then, as you said, we get to a point where now we're on our own. So we're independent, fill in the blank, investigators building our practice, building our educational portfolio, generating scholarship, doing all the things. And then we're like watching colleagues around the country or internally move up and opportunities open up, and you go, huh. You see advertisements or you talk to people, you take leadership courses, you learn how to network, how to make your case, how to have your elevator pitch. And so you learn the culture, as you said, like back at Texas A&M, you get steeped in the way we do things around here, the culture. And then, as you pointed out, the opportunity goes to a brand new culture. And now you're learning a whole new system. And so, regardless if we're internal or external, Patrick, what are some like, do you have any key takeaways or a skeleton or a framework for that you're thinking of helping people transition or have succession plan building? How are you thinking about that, Patrick? I'd love to hear more about how you're evolving this concept.
Well, that's a really rich and deep question. I put a lot of time, actually, most of my creative time is spent trying to answer that question. And I say trying because it all depends also on the audience that you're designing, programming, and leadership transition around, whether you're talking about a faculty that is stepping into a department chair or a chair that's stepping into an associate dean or dean position, or the preparation for the vice provost or associate provost positions. Those are different levels of complexity that you need to prepare the individuals to start projecting themselves into, understanding there are skills and competencies, but there's also a way to look at the problems and enact the leadership component. And before we go into any type of transition training and coaching and what have you, there's this sentence that actually it's written on my board that I look at it every day and I must use almost every day. Speaking of leadership transition, it's out of a book, called What Got You Here Won't Get You There, right? And that simple sentence is, when you listen to it and accept it, can be transformational in the sense that a lot of us academic leaders have gone through the ranks through our credentials as scholars and educators and contributing to service. So the tripartite mission for most faculty, not necessarily all, some of them who are clinicians, patient care. But there's a sense of there's a sense of those responsibilities of being a faculty, particularly the faculty piece is hinged around the creation, dissemination of new knowledge and the incorporation of that new knowledge into the learning space. And I say learning because especially for medical school, the learning is very different than the didactic one that we can imagine. So it's really engaging with learners of any levels. So all that takes a lot of skills and competencies, which some of them are very, very much steeped in or very similar to the ones that one needs in a leadership position. As a matter of fact, many faculty end up leading a research lab or research group or leading clinical practice, what have you. So there are some competencies there that really translate. However, thinking as a leader and stepping out of the scholar play space to become a leader of people, of function, of strategic vision takes the different ways of reflecting around what you do. That's the what got you here won't get you
Get you
there.
there.
And accepting that moment, that transition, that's the first transition, accepting that we have to learn to do things differently. We can lean on the experience that we have working with other people, delegating work, analyzing information, even creating a vision for ourselves. That's the beauty of being a faculty, is that we're own CEOs of our own, intellectual companies. And how do we translate that into whatever size of the group with accountability that are external, particularly financial, sometimes political? All of these things requires a transition from seeing ourselves as these independent faculty scholars into this responsible, accountable leader of people and functions and budgets that really takes will, recognition, and engagement.
Mm.
Once you've done that transition, then it means you're ready to learn.
Mm.
And the work gets easier.
Mm.
And I think I find a lot of more difficulty for those who don't recognize there's a transition and there's a change to be made, or don't accept that the change needs to be made. And that's where, we have leaders that stay in that what got you here and don't necessarily or not necessarily open to the possibilities of what it needs to be an effective leader at scale.
Oh, Patrick, profound stuff. Not only I love Marshall Goldsmith's "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and it reminds me of back in my sociology days and learning from business, the Peter principle. People will rise to their level of incompetence. He said men rise to their level of incompetence, such that you get to a certain point in your career where you're no longer being promoted, and it may be because you do a great job, you succeed. All right, now we're going to give you this job, and you succeed. And now we're going to give you this job, and you succeed. And now we're going to give you this job, and you're not really doing a good job, so done. You're donezo. You stop there. And then, so the inherent flaw in that reasoning is that kind of like you're doing the past job really well, which means you must be able to do the next level really well. Hence, the what got you here won't get you there. And so I really like how you're pointing out recognizing and accepting the fact that a change must happen. And I want to give up, I like that first transition, but let me play devil's advocate for you. Okay, well, Patrick, I've been in OSU for 3 decades. I've seen better days. There's the whole song. I've been through 3 deans. I've been through 7 chairs. You don't need to tell me how to do it. I've sat back. I've watched all the doings and the happenings. How do we coach people to have that level of awareness that it's the yes and. Yes, you have undeniably the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, and good career habits and behaviors. And you don't know what you don't know quite yet. That if you're going to go gangbusters and I'm going to fix things, give me 24 hours, I'll show you, I'll whip this place into shape. And then you and I have seen hundreds of leaders who get there and go, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I got to peek behind the curtain. And I had no idea that what I thought were the priorities were actually really minuscule relative to the bigger picture, the system-wide priorities. So how do we help people know the things that they don't really know, or can they even know them until they get there?
What a beautiful question. And I think there are 2 levels to it. There's a personal one that I thought I heard initially. And then there's the last one is, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with the last one. The last one is more a resolve to a structural, in my mind, a structural approach to leadership and leadership succession. And this is really important because I don't think that academia in general, and I'm not pointing at no attribution to a particular institution or another one, but academia doesn't do leadership succession well, doesn't think leadership succession as an integral part of its fundamental success. This is something that you can see a whole lot more in corporate America or corporate world. There's a lot of thinking around how do you prepare the individuals for the next level of leadership. This is something you see absolutely at the highest level in the armed forces, right? The armed forces really has that sense of understanding that every leader at every step is a hinge to all the groups that they oversee. And so there's an upstream and a downstream. And how do you get everyone prepared to always take that step so there's no environment that is left without that node to distribute information, to make decisions and to lead individuals. So I think we in higher education don't think that way. That doesn't mean some institutions don't. There are some institutions that think of it, and maybe it's a little bit more. I will say for a fact, the Ohio State really is thinking in that space more and more and more in the department chair and director space, and we're developing more of those programmings. And then I think for deans, we tend to go and see whatever is out there and recruit nationally, which makes sense too. But we don't necessarily prepare internal leaders for the associate deans, vice provost
Yeah.
positions, vice chairs, and it's not as organized as I wished it to be. So I think that to answer that question, to make sure people understand the dimensions of the complexity that they're about to enter, or even how the decisions are made, access is really important. So creating structures where you have individuals who can test the water without too
Mm.
much, with a lot of safety. So there's most universities that I know of, large universities have fellowship programs. We have a very large one here, and where we bring fellows, which, basically there could be leaders already or faculty who are established. We protect the early career faculty, but faculty are established to step into the office of academic affairs for a year and deal with a particular issue and help and work with a vice provost, senior vice provost to actually advance an area that needs attention. And at the same time, they're integrated into broader leadership programs. So they're exposed to the complexity. And so you're giving access, you're bringing people around the table, and suddenly they realize, oh, I had no idea, right? This is how the
Yeah.
sausage is made. And this is the level of complexity, which is really important because I always say when you hire someone for a post, and it's not necessarily a formula that cannot have flexibility, but the formula that I look for always is hire someone that will jump one level of complexity, and that identify that for them it's a level of complexity and they're ready to make the jump, because that means they're going to be hungry to learn, they're going to be willing to get into that conversation, and they know enough to identify what it looks like. Of course, once you're in there, you go, whew, that's a different level, right? A lateral move can be done. I did a lateral move when I came here, same size university, and etc. But the level of complexity was starting something totally new at a scale for a number of faculty that was bigger than before. So still there was a level of complexity. And for people to identify, they need to have access. If they step into something they don't know, it's going to be really difficult for them unless they have a lot of support. So to resolve that part, that last question, create structures that, through transparency and access, educates a broad bench, a deep bench of individuals who understand what it's like, who can translate at their level, and if they're interested, could be ready to jump in.
Patrick,
First
yeah.
part of the question, if you don't mind,
Yeah, go
how
ahead.
do you coach people that says, well, I've seen it all. Nothing has worked. Everybody comes with strategic plans and, it doesn't work. And so that's more of a that's tapping my coaching brain and saying, okay, well, first of all, I can't solve it for you, right? A coach doesn't provide advice. But through questions, I would ask questions like, well, what is limiting to you? What's limiting you to actually make a difference in that space? And helping individuals find in them what are the opportunities that they find if they have the motivation to step in, and what would they do? So as a coach, you're really a guide to help people finding themselves with the solutions and the solutions that are most meaningful. And individuals who have a very long and deep experience of an institution have incredible institutional knowledge. So the question is, what's limiting you to leverage that knowledge and make a difference? And if that were true, what would you do?
Yeah, that's great. This is great. I'm going to mirror you because go back to the structural level. Yes, we have so many systems in place in our own institutions to prepare faculty members to get from assistant professor to associate professor, from associate to full. We have markers, national impact, international impact, all these measures of saying, okay, now you are ready, you have achieved this. And yet, when we hire leaders and recruit leaders for department chairs, division direct, not even, let's say department chairs, provost, dean type levels, there are dean schools after after the fact. Once you're now a dean, oh, you can go to the AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges, and go to these dean boot camps. Or now that you've made it to mid-career, now you can go to the mid-career faculty leadership program. Or now that you are a fill in the blank, you can now go and brush up on your skills. To me, that's it's good. You're building a network, but it may be the train has already left, the building. Let's go before that and say, as you said, Patrick, oh, are you thinking about being someday this, that, or the other? This is the preparatory, this is the launch pad that would get you in good stead to be on that path, like you said in the military, where it's the cause and effect, that chicken and the egg thing. Do you wait till you accidentally or purposely fall into a position and then go, okay, now I got to figure out my strengths and my opportunities for improving, and let's get me in marathon ready shape. Hurry up, the race is coming up, I got to get prepped, versus preparing years in advance and identifying these skills and competencies that need a little bit of tweaking, supplemented with the coaching, identifying opportunities to not only leverage your own strengths, but then to recognize your weaknesses. You want this, and helping faculty have an authentic, kind of genuine reflection on, yeah, I do have a little bit of rough edges, and maybe I'm being a little bit arrogant in my supposition that I can fix this. Is there opportunity for me to be humble and to learn a different way of being? So I love this fellowship program. That to me fixes that gap of, hey, now you're a dean. Let's help you be a good dean, versus, do you want to be a dean? Come on and sit down and take a look at what a dean means. And then being able to reflect personally with a coach, with the mentors in the system to then fine tune that. That to me sounds like a nice succession plan packaging. So I just want to pause on that structure component and think, yeah, kudos to you. That fellowship program sounds like that is preparing leaders before they get there, in addition to after.
Well, and for example, one of the things that I appreciate immensely from joining the Ohio State is that it belongs to the Big Ten Academic Alliance, and the Big Ten Academic Alliance, which is not 10, it's 18 now. We're a whole bunch of large institution. Of course, we know of it mostly because of the competition on whatever fields they play on. What really is interesting about the alliance is that we have a pact and an agreement across all of us that we share information, we share processes freely, whatever that is, whether it's around workload, promotion and tenure, dual career programming. And if one of us has a program that we've developed, we make it available free to all the other institutions. So there's a
Right.
lot of expertise sharing that accelerates each other's work and excellence and support of faculty, of students, and what have you.
I love it.
There is also the Big Ten Academic Alliance has a really interesting leadership program, the Academic Leadership Program, ALP, that selects 5 individuals per university. So you can imagine this is close to 100 by now. And these individuals are going through this collective leadership programming where we offer them monthly programming in our own institution, and then they get together several times
Ah,
across the institution, the entire group, and they have speakers and etc. And then what happens is that, which is the last piece, is that those programs are really interesting. However, we need to recognize them. That means they can't be a dead end. They need to lead to these individuals then being pulled into positions. Well, that's usually the case. Most of the individuals who are selected and follow the Big Ten Academic Alliance ALP program tend to end up being deans, provost, vice provost, what have you.
wow.
So I know your podcast is the faculty factory. This is a leadership factory of sorts. But it's a small program for all the universities in the US. So we need more. We need to multiply this. To go back to what you said, it's great. However, we're catching people past the half of their career,
Yeah.
which is great because we get them into a place to start thinking about high level of complexity in their leadership. But where are we in the very early stages?
Mm, mm.
And so I want to mention this because not long ago, I think it was January, early February, the Chronicle of Higher Education had an article that really caught my eye. And it was around the fact that universities don't prepare their postdocs for the professional environment, a diverse professional environment, that we tend to ask of them to be very unidimensional, deep into their scholarship, and eventually have them, consider what a career in higher education might look like as a faculty, right? Not necessarily prepare them for other possibilities of work, which there are plenty now for PhDs who have postdoc. And there's this little sentence saying, to help our postdoc, we should have coaching programs for them, right? And I went, well, I'm a coach. I'm at a university. We have postdoc program. So I reached out to the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies with a friend and said, hey, read this article. Here are my credentials. And if you think I could be of service to the postdoc community, here's an email that I'd like you to distribute. Free of charge, I'm offering pro bono services, coaching services to postdocs as my time allows. And I usually reserve a few hours in the late afternoon, evening for my coaching engagement, as is if any would like. And I got overwhelmed very quickly.
Oh, you don't say.
But
Don't
that's
say.
okay because some individuals only came once, and I have a few individuals with whom I've spoken a number of times. And let me tell you, if there is a work that I have adored immensely, I love coaching
Mm,
to start with.
mm.
Working with these creatives is so incredible. And the most important discovery, which is so important to leadership, is or was the conversation around personal values and how personal values anchor your
Everything.
behaviors and are an anchor to identifying and meeting your purpose, which also allows you to be a more compassionate, empathetic leader. And I love values work no matter what. I love values work in the coaching space, especially with leaders. to have to discover this with a very early career individual who suddenly saw the value, I mean, literally of the value work, and I realized, oh, this is powerful. And I
Wow.
realized, well, I'm glad we started now because that is going to stay with you for your life. I had to work in my late 40s
40s.
to actually start having conversations around value-based leadership. So that's another piece, right? Can we have a continuum where we're not asking of these early career to step into leadership, but we're preparing them to identify some of the components that are like the human components of
Yes.
leadership, so that once they have the opportunity, that work is a decade old or more, and now they completely know how to leverage their strength, their values, their sense of purpose into the leadership space.
Oh, Patrick, you are so, so smart. I love this so much. And we're talking before we hit record about this, the current state of affairs in terms of trying to sell the promise of academic health to young learners and how we fear that we may be losing the future brain power because young people look at our lives and go, I would never want that. I have professors and mentors who working so hard to see their patients and trying to generate RVUs and trying to get those grants and trying to get the scholarship and teaching. And why would I do that? And what you've just said to me is the spark, the new spark that you mentioned, that if we could fashion academic health into in addition to the wonderful work we do and this incredible service we do for population health and communities and creating, discovering, curing, preventing, all that wonderful, imaginative, curious, creative work, if we could embed in it an additional promise that we, from the beginning to the end, are all about career and professional development. You will have this wraparound intake when you are in graduate school, and we will develop with you, alongside with you, a framework that will help you continue to grow and evolve and improve and find these hidden gems inside of you that you didn't even know you had. And we will walk with you as you level up in every facet of your professional and personal development. That's a new promise to me. That's something that this is not going to be arbitrary or accidental, or if you so choose to be a leader, you can take this course or that class or this or the other. If we weave this, what you just described, this structural at the macro level to the personal micro to all the meso levels, if that's built in, that doesn't that kind of make this industry more attractive, an investment for someone to say, yes, I want to do this is my career. And it's also personally fulfilling on a different level because it's truly demonstrating an investment in me as a human being or as a person. How does anybody lose with that? How can you not? Isn't that, is that what you're saying, Patrick? I just think it's
Yeah,
so
well,
smart the way you've described it.
yeah, and way beyond just the health industry, but for sure, for academic health, especially I would say academic health among others that are so steeped into sense of purpose. Right? I mean, it's a career, it's an industry. All of these can be true. And for a lot of individuals, and I argue probably it should be for everyone, it's a calling. It can't be just a profession. It can't be just a career. The health industry is about health, is about distributing a level of care, service that is interested in somebody else's improvement in health or life. So it's really deep down a calling. And deep down, anything that is a calling is steeped in purpose. And individuals who align with that sense of purpose, to whom that particular purpose really speak to their core values, again, values and purpose, then there are there's no question about the challenges in meeting the day-to-day work because it's difficult work. It's a lot of work. It's long hours, depending on which part of the health, academic health environment you are. All of the individuals that I have met, well, faculty in general, if not all, really inspire me for their level of creativity and their engagement, their commitment to their profession. Individuals in the academic health industry are particularly inspiring because a lot of the work that they do is really steeped into that sense of how do I improve health?
Right.
Health for individuals, health for communities, a particular surgical procedure or a particular, prosthetic, whatever that is. And that's quite extraordinary. That's altruistic at the max. And if we don't start talking about the sense of purpose and core values, then there could be a disconnect. And the further away you go from the original, the origin story of why somebody wanted to go into this particular health field,
right,
the more disconnect there is, and the more they lose that sense of purpose or potential, not necessarily the
potential
potential to lose a
misalignment,
sense of purpose.
burnout, all those things that we know that happens. You're right. So tying back to that is so important. And that's why what we do in faculty affairs and faculty development and leadership, it's the glue that holds that together. If you can fall back on that sense of identity, purpose, meaning, despite the challenges, and there are many, and there will be many, if we can at least demonstrate to people that you are in an institution at least that values you as a person, I don't see how we can lose with that. That's going to be recruiting the best, keeping the best, growing the best. That's going to be good for industry, for the hospital, for the patients, for the faculty members, for the departments. And I think, gosh, I think you're onto something there. I think the connection, the spark to draw people into this space is by closing the loop and saying that we will provide you with, yes, policies, programs, resources, and this personal connection for leadership. And we will help. We are here to help transition. Their life is full of transitions. And now we're also about personal career and professional transitioning. That's what we do. To me, it's making sense. I think that's the next generation of what we do.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, you have a book that speaks to that, right? Your own book with Heather Broad really speaks about, redefining what it means to be in this industry and to
Yeah.
be in this, knowledge-based industry and care-based industry and going from achievement chasing to more purpose-driven type of work.
Mm.
And I think it's, I see the moment we're living in right now in the rethinking of what it means to be an American university and how are we going to be able to do the work, the research work and funded work in the way we used to do it is pushing us to rethink our role, our own purpose. How do we support individuals? And will automatically push us to redefine our value base and our purpose. Why do we do this work? Well, if some achievements cannot be achieved, does that mean we have to stop? No. That means we have to do it differently.
Yeah.
And if we are redirecting and reframing our work in the way you share it in your book towards more purpose-driven self-evaluation and really more a human space for that work, then we can strip away some of these achievements. It doesn't change us, but if we're dependent on the achievement, we lose ourselves. So this is why your book is so important, is that it redirects to the identity of the individual, the identity to the core of who they are and their purpose rather than to the external achievements. If I may say so. I hope I didn't misrepresent your
I love
work.
it. No, Patrick, this is wonderful. Gosh, I could just keep going and going and going. Dr. Patrick Louchouarn, would you like to leave us with some last thoughts about succession, transition, leadership? What should someone listening to this know? You talked about that first transition. learning to do things differently. What got you here won't get you there. You want a little riff as a closing comment about what should we think about? What should we be curious about?
Um, so yes, there's this notion, and actually a little later this week, my colleague and I, Helen and I, are actually giving a national webinar for Interfolio on leading in moments of change.
Mhm.
And there's this wonderful small book that is so important from Eric James and Lynn Perry Wooden called The Prepared Leader: Emerge from Any Crisis More Resilient Than Before. It's a fantastic book. It's short, precise, full with advice and ways to reframe. And today, where we are, we have to rethink our models of operation in higher education and think of all the moments we're living, whether it's dealing with AI, whether it's dealing with how do we fund research in ways that are different than what we have been functioning with? How do we support our faculty, understanding a whole lot of them, especially in the health industry and the health fields, tend to raise their own salaries. So there's going to be a lot of anxiety. Some of the work is not going to be able to be done in the same way. Even though it's protected by academic freedom, it's still not funded. So how do we rethink the model of higher education? Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it a crisis. I would call it a major change that's multidimensional. And it's interesting. One of the examples that I give in that webinar is that in 2008, the island on which you're sitting got hit by Hurricane Ike. I was a faculty there. The island got flooded. Our campus got flooded. UTMB got incredibly impacted. It disrupted our entire modes of operation. At the exact same time, the country was going through an economic crisis. And therefore, it was a perfect storm of the sort, right? All of the institutions in the area of Galveston and Houston got really impacted. And there wasn't a whole lot of attention nor funding from the federal government that usually you see from FEMA and others, because we were dealing as a nation with a major financial breakdown. And at the same time, that was made worse because Houston, for those who don't know, produces 30% of all the gasoline in the US and 100% of the exotic fuels in the US. So shutting down the petrochemical industry in the area for any hurricane has major impacts on the US. All of that happened at the same time within a fraction of a few weeks and had an impact for several years. So I think that this is what I love about that book is that we need to start thinking that we always have to have an eye for what is going to be the next disruption. How do we prepare and how do we create resiliency in our systems so that disruptions don't break us, but slow us at most? And so easier said than done. And we're still figuring it out. COVID was another one, right? We're still trying to figure out how do we replace ourselves. If it were only AI, even AI itself is making us rethink our entire way of working and teaching and learning. So we have all these multiple things happening. What I encourage people to say, and the best lesson of that book is take any of these disruptions as an opportunity to learn. And I'll go back to how I started. The transition from what got you here to, won't get you there is to accept that you're going to have to learn. So if you get into a leadership position, accept that you will always have to learn and lean into the discomfort. And that's why we started in higher education anyway, because we love to learn. At least that's true for me.
Patrick, amazing. Folks, please check out Dr. Patrick Louchouarn's podcast, Tell Me Your Why. And we will put a link in his description on the facultyfactory.org website of both books, Marshall Goldsmith's What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and The Prepared Leader, Emerge from Any Crisis More Resilient Than Before, by Erica James and Lynn Wooten. I hope you come back and we need to have more conversations. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for tuning in to the Faculty Factory podcast. We are a faculty development community sharing tools to build academic leaders in healthcare. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast? Please visit facultyfactory.org/contact and send me a message there. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Office of Faculty Affairs at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas.